Okay. This next case I find personally upsetting in the way that this particular taxpayer was misled and mistreated by the Canada Revenue Agency. It's just disgraceful what happened here. What the client did was they were a startup company that I believe got bankrupted by this transaction. They're no longer in existence because of what happened here. They had 3 employees who were in a development agreement, and they basically did something legal, but they just didn't do it right. There's actually a method that if I'm an employee and I've left my job in industry where I was making the big bucks, and I come in and I start my own company with 1 or 2 or 3 partners or whatever the case may be here, and we're living off our life savings while we try to launch that business. Typically, when I do tax returns for these people, it's not like, well, hey, why'd you take this big bonus? I'm saying, how do you live on $800 a month? Or basically, they're taking subsistence, food, just what they need to live. They don't buy new clothes, nothing. So their salary of $12,000 a year doesn't represent the fact that they left their $250,000 a year job in industry to work twice as hard here. Okay? And there's a mechanism within the claim process, within the Act itself, 78 sub 4, that says unpaid amounts. If I have an amount that's incurred in the year but not paid within 180 days, I still incurred it. If I say, hey, Ed, come work for me, I can pay you $5,000 a month cash now, and $10,000 once this great product takes off, and we're all going to be multimillionaires, and I'll owe you the difference, and you agree because you think it's a great idea or in your interest. That happens all the time. What happens then is on the SR&ED claim, I claim all of the money, all $15,000 a month. I claim the $5,000 I paid, and the other $10,000 I put on line 315 of the T661, amounts incurred in the year but not paid within 180 days. So the CRA has the right to come in to review the work Ed did to make sure it's SR&ED, it's reasonable, that it qualifies. And then ultimately, all I ever have to do once it's approved is in any future year say, well, I've paid Ed some of that money that I owed him, give me my credits. And I'll get the credits, less my proxy amount, so I don't get an overhead allocation. But that's an effective way to do it. That's ultimately what this company was trying to do, but they didn't do it the right way. They had bad advice. So they created a compensation agreement that instead of doing that, said, we're only going to pay you if the SR&ED claim is successful. And if not, you're not entitled to any of the money. So the CRA came in and said, well, you have to pay the wages first before we'll allow it. So the client borrowed the money and paid the withholding on the wages. You don't actually have to pay the wages. You can loan the wages back, but you have to pay the CRA the withholding on the wages, which they did. They borrowed the money to do that at the CRA's advice. Then the CRA denied the SR&ED claim. Yeah, this is a horror story. It used to be the CRA wanted people to encourage people to do this. They didn't try to destroy small companies like this, almost vexatiously or maliciously. Like I've never seen this kind of treatment before. I've seen bad treatment by the CRA, but this is a new precedent. Okay, so they advised CRA advice could not be contingent. They put the company in difficult financial circumstances, so they had to borrow the money to pay it, and then basically they got not only denied the claim, but they got assessed for late remitted source deductions on top of it and charged penalties on top of that. So it was just a triple whammy. It's unbelievable. I had to read this 3 times and say, no, this is a joke. This didn't really happen. Yeah, so I'm seeing the issue here is, well, could we achieve the objectives, i.e. accrue the wages and have them reviewed by the CRA? You don't pay any tax on wages that are incurred but not remitted. It's under the Employment Act. An employee never is liable for tax on money that they earn but didn't collect from the employer. And ironically enough, the employer isn't liable for the tax either if they didn't pay the employee. So, but really, it's just to protect the employee, right? And that's fair. What the company did here is instead of just filing it the correct way and achieving what they wanted to do, they applied under the Manitoba, they applied under the provincial legislation to have something called a rescission order to say that a contract never exists. And what happened is the Manitoba judge said she was unwilling to create a precedence which would conflict with the tax court. She didn't feel they had that authority. So client lost. The client lost. They lost their legal fees. They lost everything. They lost their company. They probably lost their livelihoods. As a result of misinformation on an issue that actually has planning. It tells you, here's how you do it. Here's how you, just like I explained, it's not hard. It's built into the Income Tax Act. It's built into the SR&ED form for unpaid remuneration. The client was a small company. They didn't have sophisticated advice. They did the wrong thing. I can't defend that, but the implications and the fact that the CRA steered them down the path that literally got them slaughtered, I don't know what to say about that as a practitioner, but man, I wish they were my client. I could have maybe helped them. Okay, so the long-term implications, are many-fold. The CRA's position on unpaid wages was correct. The client didn't do it the right way, but instead of telling them, hey, you could have done it this other way and put him on side, they made them pay all the deductions and penalties, and then they made them pay source deductions that they wouldn't have incurred anyways, and then they charged them penalties on top of that, and denied the credits, and they incurred legal fees going to a provincial court. I mean, the client lost at every potential level. Okay, so I don't know what the implications are on that, or lessons. There's probably something to be learned from that, but I'll be darned if I know what it is.